Hi, welcome to another episode of Amazon Book Talks. Today we have Ross Welford with us and we'll talk about his new book, The Monkey Who Fell from the Future.
I can almost mistake.
Whenever you guys are ready.
We'll say action.
Thank you so much, Akshay.
Good talking to you, Akshay. Thanks very much.
We did? Ross, welcome to Amazon Book Talks.
Thank you, Akshay.
Yeah, so we'll start with the questions from the new book.
Yeah.
So, if I'm not wrong, this is your first book, I think, that begins in the future.
Yeah.
Your other
it
books
does.
have they go into the future, but this is something that you travel back to time.
Yeah.
So this has a very interesting plot and very interesting characters. But I think your readers would like to know from you, what is this book about?
What's it about? The overall theme is the theme that goes through most of my books is friendship and bravery and loyalty. But in this case, 4 kids who are about 11 to 12 get involved in a time slip mystery where live on television in 2023, 2 children are demonstrating what everybody thinks is just a toy. They think it's a joke time machine. And oh my goodness, it works. And they are thrust into a world 400 years from now where they swap places with 2 other kids and a monkey. And the adventure continues as they try to get everything back into its right place.
You talked about bravery, but a lot of your leading characters have been kids. I think most of them are. So,
Yeah, all of them.
what is your definition of bravery? Because kids don't have these kinds of power that we see these days, superhuman powers and superheroes.
Yeah.
What is bravery for you?
Well, for me, I think it's really, in most cases in my books, it's having the courage to do the right thing, really. I think my readers, most children, like to see other kids put into situations that are terrifying, and then using their own courage and their own wits to somehow get out of it.
I'm a big fan of books and movies that have time travel as their major theme. Time travel has been in literature and in movies since, if you'll think of Christmas Carol, it's also a sort of time travel. Time
is.
Machine by H.G. Wells and Terminator by James Cameron, the movies. If you look, Hollywood has exploited this theme over the years, but it still seems fresh. In Harry Potter as well, we have time travel. In Marvel movies, we have time travel. And of course, your books have time travel. What is so fascinating about this theme of time travel that it's still working?
That's a good question. I'm interested. I'm glad you mentioned A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, because when I talk to children, they're all familiar with that story. It's on. We have it on TV in the UK every Christmas, and it really was the very first, certainly in English, the very first story when a character travelled into the future, travelled into the past, and it as you say, it's engaged our imaginations ever since then in such a way. I think really it's its appeal lies in it's the ultimate what if. We all imagine, we all dream of what might be in the future, and we all, I'm sure all of us, yearn for the past. We all think, if I could have done that again, if I could go back and change that bit, it's mistakes that we make, and I think that's almost universal, and I think that's where its appeal lies.
I think every big author, every big writer was once a reader, and everyone has their own favorite works that influences them to write the type of stories they write.
Yeah.
So, what are the works that have influenced you as a writer and maybe as a reader as well?
Blimey, actually, that's a big question. All I can say really is I can tell you the books that I read loads of when I was a kid. When I was very small, I liked the book of A. Milne, the poems. My dad used to read me the Winnie the Pooh stories and the A. Milne verses. Then when I could read myself, I very soon became keen on Enid Blyton.
Okay.
And it thrills me that Enid Blyton is still so popular today, particularly in India. Her stories have got an appeal to kids that spans the ages. It's just, the kids having wonderful times. So I loved Enid Blyton. I read all of the Secret Seven. I read all of the Famous Five, and lots of the other ones as well.
Yeah.
I loved Harry Potter. I was completely grown up by the time Harry Potter came around. But I think J.K. Rowling changed children's writing in a way that we're still enjoying the effect of. I think there were in 1996. Amazing that it's so long ago when the first Harry Potter came out.
That's true.
You think, was it that long ago? My God! But the children's writing, there was obviously there were children's authors still, and I think, but J.K. Rowling just put a firecracker under the whole industry, something that people like me are still benefiting from, So I think that was very, very special, and demonstrated that children are willing to read quite complex stuff if it's presented in the right way, and the one book that completely influenced how I wrote was Wonder by R.J. Palacio.
Okay.
Because I hadn't yet written my first book, which was Travelling With A Hamster, and I was sort of fiddling with it. I had a few ideas I was sketching out, and I wasn't very confident. And then I read Wonder. Which is very, very different from my stuff, except in the fact that this was a middle-aged woman writing in the first person as a 10-year-old boy. And that, because I hadn't written anything really until that really surprised me. I thought, you can do this, an adult can write as a child. Of course, that wasn't the first time it had been done, but it was, at the time, it drew it to my attention that here was somebody who was about my age writing as a 10-year-old. And I started writing Travelling With A Hamster in the first person. It took off, so those three writers, I would say, were the ones that J.K. Rowling, Enid Blyton and R.J. Palacio were the ones that have influenced me.
I think my next questions come from that, because you've talked about children's writing. There's a different kind of sensibility that you need to write children's book. There's different kind of language, because children look not like adults, and you have to think differently. You have to write differently. So what sort of challenges does children's book actually produce?
You can't swear. You can't. You guys. Unlike, well, certainly in the UK, unlike UK kids, kids do use some pretty bad language in the UK. I think Indian kids are much better behaved, but you can't. But that goes without saying. I try not to. I try not to write for children.
Okay.
I just try to write a story, and it's only but because I'm writing nearly always in the first person, I have to create a voice that is plausible and is plausibly young. Now, obviously, it's a bit more sophisticated than a real child would actually speak. But you have to push it as far as it's plausible, and like I say, I try not to write for children. I just write, and sometimes, you know, and then in the editing process and then the rewriting, you go, would a child say that? Would a child know that word? And then maybe you change it around. Okay, but you know, I don't think it's more of a mindset for writing than it is for something that you consciously set out to. I am now going to write a children's story. I just write a story.
I think I have to disagree on one thing. I'm not sure that Indian kids are much better behaved.
Well, I don't know. I don't speak your languages, so I wouldn't know. I'll take your word for it that they are.
I was actually reading your book, Time Travelling with a Hamster, and there are a lot of Indian references there, a lot of Indian characters. How did that come about?
I was kind of I did, because I mean there's a big Indian theme through that. It was kind of, what would I call it? Writing magic, which is the nearest thing that I can describe it to be. I don't write with a plan. Okay, I don't sit down. A lot of writers do, and that's fine for them, you know. But what I do, I have a vague idea, and I start writing and see where it goes. So I don't say, I'm going to have this character here and this character here, and then I don't do any of that. So I'd had this vague idea of a kid who, on his 12th birthday, this is Al in the book, receives instructions on where to find a time machine that his late father has been building. And so I started with that scene. I started with the scene of the kid's birthday. And there was a knock on the door. Again, it's a bit of a writing cliche. You introduce a new character, there's a knock on the door. And as I'm writing, Al goes to the door, opens it up, and it's his grandfather. I knew it was going to be his grandfather, and I knew I didn't want a stereotypical grandfather, which in the UK might be somebody with a flat cap and a pipe and a walking stick. You know, I knew I didn't want that. I wanted something more dynamic, and so I started describing a character that sort of half appeared in my mind's eye.
Okay,
and that was Grandpa Byron, and he was Indian, and I have no idea where it came from. It was just, and so that made me think, if he's Indian, that means Al is a quarter Indian. And so then I said, oh, okay, well, I'll give him an Indian name. And I chose Chowdhury because I had a friend called Chowdhury. And from then, from that prompted everything else. Because I didn't want just to drop in this Indian character as a comedy exotic character. I didn't want to do that, and he can't do that these days anyway.
That's true.
And so I made sure that Byron was a fully rounded character, and I know his backstory and everything, and so everything came from then, really. And so I researched it, and I checked things with people, and and so he's an educated, he's a very educated, sophisticated man with a heart of gold, and I absolutely love Byron, And the book plug coming up. Al and Grandpa Byron and the other guys, they're coming back in my very next book.
That's really good. But it is fascinating, because he was such a well-written character that I actually thought that he might be inspired by someone you actually knew.
Not really.
Some Indian character.
Not really. The only thing that the only real person that inspired him was a restaurant owner when I was younger, who had a wonderful voice. Because where I grew up is in the northeast of England, and there's a particular accent called Geordie, and that's how the character is in by book speak, because that's it. And this restaurant owner had a combination of an Indian accent and a Geordie accent.
Okay.
And it's a lovely combination, quite comical sometimes, so I thought, yeah, that's how Grandpa Byron will speak.
That's really
but
good.
it's quite hard to convey that.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
true.
have
That's
to say
true.
he speaks a combination of an Indian accent and Geordie.
Yeah. But it's actually really well written. Ross, I have to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Have you ever suffered from a writer's block? And if yes, how do you overcome that?
Yeah, I think actually every writer suffers from writer's block at some point. I just call it getting stuck.
Okay.
You get stuck and you have to go off and write something else. Write something else, or go back and leap forward to a bit that you're going to enjoy writing. I always like writing chasers.
Okay.
In most of my books, there's at least one or two chasers.
Yeah.
I really enjoy writing them. They're great. They're quick to write. So I'll go forward and I'll write that. Or write dialogue. That's the other thing. If you're stuck, you just get some characters talking to each other. You can cut it out later in the edit. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You just make them talk to each other. And very often, somebody will say something funny, which you'll keep. But yeah, it happens. I just consider it part of the job.
Yeah. If we are talking about writer's block, we have to talk about writers, especially young writers, because a lot of young writers actually follow Amazon on social media. So they would actually like to know 1 or 2 tips from you about how to start a new book, how to go about it.
Right. Okay. Well, I've given some a good tip there. If you get stuck, try dialogue. Just make them talk to each other. That's a good one. I would say don't try too hard to be original.
Okay.
Originality is really, really important. Okay, but you can tie yourself up in knots in thinking, God, that's been done before. That's been done before. That's been done before. I mean, if I thought that about time travel, I would never have started.
That's true. Yeah.
Or my second book, somebody being invisible. That's been done before. Everything has been done before. Everything has been done before.
Yeah.
You can improve, or you can put your own spin on something. So don't get too upset about that. Don't copy anybody. Don't copy characters. Make sure that you're not just regurgitating the plot of something that you've already read, and don't copy characters' names and stuff. That's a bit daft. But start writing something. And the other tip I have, which I tell a lot of people, is make sure somehow you get to the end. Okay? And it doesn't really matter how. Even if there's great big plot holes everywhere, and you even write in plot hole, I'll fill in later. Get rid of it, and then somehow get to the point where you write the end. That's when you can put the whole thing together and you go, right, what have I got here? Does that make sense? Yeah, that kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense. That's all right. Then you start again.
Yeah.
And then it's in the rewrite that you make it all make sense.
Ross, this will be my last question. At Amazon, we have a new initiative called Giftabook, which talks about the culture of reading and how a book is a gift that keeps on giving. So we wanted to know from Ross Welford, which are the 3 books he'll pick as gifts.
Can I choose one of my own?
You can, obviously.
All of my own. No, all right. I would like to, I can't give anybody my very next one because it's not out yet. But I would give young people the Monkey Who Fell from the Future. Because it's the favourite one that I've written so far. I'll tell you, there's for slightly older children.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful writer called Jonathan Stroud, who, well, best known for writing Lockwood and Co., which has been on Netflix and everything. But he's got a new series starting called The Outlaws, Scarlet and Brown. And they're just as good as the Lockwood and Co. stories. They're really, really good. I really love those books. And yeah, let's go for a classic as well. We mentioned Charles Dickens. So my favourite Charles Dickens story is A Tale of Two Cities. So that's, everybody loves classics. So A Tale of Two Cities is a good one.
Ross, thanks a lot for talking with us. It was a great conversation, and we can't wait to read your new books and of course this book.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been great. Thanks.